Thanks, Smokies.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, everybody on the East Coast. I'm out here, West Coast. I just wanted to came out here to give Norman Lear a hug because the brothers survived COVID. And it was the first time since I started that I could get off a plane and know he had maximum immunity. So just know that Norman, as he approaches 100, is in incredible health and great spirits. And yet that was the start of the week. And while we were at dinner, we got word of a leak from the Supreme Court, first of its kind that any of us could remember. Samuel Alito was writing a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, full stop, and that there was the majority there. Donald Trump had packed the courts, George W. Bush had packed the courts to get to this moment. It's now clear that many Americans never believed that this would actually happen. And yet, here we are. And we at People for the American Way are committed to being an ally in this struggle. We always have been. We see it as integral to our fight to stop the rise of a far right-wing authoritarian movement in our country that, quite frankly, we saw seize power, Donald Trump, and seems to be doing their best to be headed back there again. While many hope that this may change the arc of the midterms, let's be really clear. This puts a lot of people at grave danger in profound ways and send us back in ways we're all trying to wrap our minds around. I grew up knowing that my mom had had an illegal abortion. She and I have talked about this publicly before. And that if my mom had the wrong illegal abortionist, I wouldn't have been created. And so I think for a lot of us, it brings up different types of memories in our families and personally. And a lot of us have been in those feelings this week. The reason we're all part of People For at the end of the day is to be allies to each other in this great struggle to stop these authoritarians from sending us backwards. This will be a fight. We will be in for the long haul until we overturn what they've just done to the American people. Tonight is my esteemed honor to bring to you many of our greatest board members and staff members. Tonight, we are joined by the esteemed Dr. Mary Frances Berry, one of the great civil rights legal minds of our times, professor at the University of Pennsylvania School of Law. We are also joined by the great actress and activist, Alyssa Milano, and a third of our board members, Reverend Dr. Delicia Davis of our African American Ministers Leadership Conference. They will be followed by our Executive Vice President, my leader here at People for the American Way, Marge Baker. Certainly on everything federal, she is the go-to. And she came to us longer ago than she would like me to mention from the staff of Reverend Paul Wellstone, and really has been a fixture, fighting for everything good on Capitol Hill for a long time. And we are grateful that she leads our government affairs effort. And I'm grateful to have a partner in leading this great organization, and Marge Baker. And finally, we are joined tonight by Kristen Dorr, one of the great writers and researchers on our Right Wing Watch team. Tonight, I thought we would start with Mary Frances and then move to Alyssa, and then we'll kind of move right down the line. Marge will go at the end to really talk about the call to action. But Mary Frances, as the esteemed legal scholar and activist on this panel, could you talk to us about what this means for the country and what this means to you? Mary Frances, you were on mute. You're on mute. Dr. Berry, you're on mute.
You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I
There
did
you go.
twice. Didn't work.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. Let me just say that what one does about what has happened and looking to see whether how this opinion will be, a decision will be actually formally made, and figuring out what to do depends on what lane you're in, I think, and what lane you are can be more successful in helping to stop what's happening or to respond to it if the opinion decision comes down the way it was leaked. And for People4, the most important thing, I think, is to work on the electoral issues. Who getting people to vote. People4 is good at that. And getting people who are the right people in the state legislatures and in the Congress of the United States to, in fact, support remedying the problem to the extent that it can be done. And if this decision does come down, there are a lot of issues. I mean, there's how fast can we get a pill that can be mailed to people and contend with states that might pass laws saying you can't as an issue. The triggers that are in some states, like Louisiana, where I happen to be right now, has a trigger that if this comes down, they immediately outlaw abortion. And other states have that too. So I think that on the voting side, the candidates, supporting candidates and getting something done. But there's something related to that if I could say to you, and that is getting the right messaging, It is true that if we talk about authoritarianism and that this is a reflection of it, and the consequences and the threat to our institutions of government. And I'm not just talking about the leak, I'm talking about the opinion, what the decision might be. We can blame Trump. My understanding is that Gen Xers respond, if you just say Trump, they will immediately jump up and want to go out and do something. That's good. That if you talk to people who are boomers or millennials, they'll want to know more about your messaging. What is it you're trying to do and how you define it? So I think it's really important to get not just the work of turning out, but the message. And I would hope that the message might incorporate something that has to do with the fact that we started with this fight years ago to try to get abortion, pro-choice legal. And that is that if women cannot control their own bodies and make a decision about what they want to do, and whether they want to have children or not, and what they do. They can't do anything really that they want to do. That this is a freedom, women, a right to control what they do with their own bodies. The third thing I would say quickly is that we should, when we start campaigning for this, and everyone should understand this is a long haul, the right has been chipping away at this for years. And it didn't just start with Trump, in case you thought it did. I mean, Reagan was the one who put the constitutional amendment to end abortion when he came into Washington and created a big kerfuffle that happened. George Bush the first was a guy who switched from pro-choice to anti-abortion for political reasons and did all kinds of nefarious things. So it's been going on a long time, and they've been chipping away, not only in litigation, but with the grassroots and responding and building and building. So it took a while for them to do this. And I hope it doesn't take too long, but it may take a while if this decision comes down. In the meanwhile, there are people who should be protesting. There are people who should be trying to influence the people who are on the court to try to make them see sweet reason, if that's possible to do, by any means necessary, as long as it doesn't involve violence. So that's basically where I stand on this.
Dr. Berry, in your intonation, you hear the perspective of a Southerner. One of the differences between the South and the North is oftentimes a longer term perspective. The conservatives tend to come from the South and they plot for like 50 years, and we're reaping the fruit of that, right? The North, we just talk about 2-year cycles. So just talk for a second about what it's going to take as far as how we approach, the overturning of a Supreme Court decision in such a profound way. Like, what's the arc that you see? What's the path back to reason?
Well, the path back to reason is to start at the grassroots level, trying to mobilize people to challenge people who are running for office. I mean, at the state and local level, not just in the Congress of the United States. See, I'm responding to this as if the decision has been handed down, but it hasn't been. So we still have some hope that we can figure out a way to keep this from happening, since we don't know what will be the outcome. But if it does happen, then I think that what has to be done is to run some candidates and oppose candidates who won't come out and tell us what they will do. This is not a season for politicians to shuck and jive and pretend like they're going to do something or not evade the answer to the question. You need commitments from people. And I mentioned the point about the pill. We need the abortion pill, so that we need people who are in support of that. We need to be at the grassroots level, trying to raise issues with people and pushing them to do that and stand ready. And we should pretend like the decision has been handed down for that purpose. We shouldn't wait around to see whether it's going to happen. We should begin immediately mobilizing people, organizing people, if we haven't already done it, and start trying to get people to work on those local issues and know what they are in their state legislatures and see what they can do about them.
Amen. Amen. By the way, we see on the call, in addition to hundreds of members, have been joined by a couple of your fellow board members, March DeBankin and Greg Frizados, as he popped up in the chat. Going next to Reverend Dr. Delisha Davis, speak to us as a clergywoman about what this moment means to your congregation, to your constituents, what the conversation is amongst your peers who are clergy people who are also civil rights activists.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here tonight among this esteemed panel. Then I really think that this is about multiple issues all wrapped up into one. It's about choice, it's about equality, and it's about power. I think the debate, in fact, is not even about abortion. It's about whether or not the government should have the power to dictate women's health choices. And regardless of what our positions are on abortion, that should be of great concern to everyone here in the United States of America. It's also about equality, because the laws that are against, in the states that are against abortion, disproportionately affect persons of color and those of lower social economic classes. And we have to think about it. There are women who stood in the forefront to fight for this equality. Tony Bambara, Frances Beale, Alice Walker, Barbara Smith, so many. And they argued that real equality could only be achieved by expanding parameters of reproductive justice. But a lot of what is going on is rooted in systemic racism, and it disproportionately affects many of our people of color. And the last part I said about power in this, it just takes away so much from us, even in as you think about it from the religious community. A ruling that strips access to essential reproductive care betrays our constitutional promise of true religious freedom. It undermines the rights of people of all faiths, and not allowing them to be able to make healthcare decisions rooted in their own values and not the values of legislators. So I think today, the choices of our society, the equality within our society, and all of our essential freedoms are at stake. And so we all have a responsibility today and now to stand up and to protect the choices of our generation, and especially for those generations that are to come. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I think about how this is going to affect her generation and her children and children that are to come. We must do something now. And as Dr. Berry said, we have to act like it's already happened and stand up and stand together.
Amen. Amen. And next, your fellow board member, Alyssa Milano, who hasn't just authored a great book, Sorry Not Sorry, as a dynamic podcast, but also really leads an army of young women who are inspired by her activism and her insight. Alyssa, what does this moment mean to you? What does it mean to those young women that you're often in conversation with about the future of the country?
I mean, it's devastating, and I feel like, forgive me to everyone who's watching this, because I can't really be. I have to be impassioned in this moment. So I'm not calm. I'm not feeling like everything's gonna be okay, and I think we need to be really clear. Not only that abortion care is a fundamental constitutional right, and that everyone has the right to make those healthcare decisions for themselves and for their families and for their communities with freedom and dignity. And freedom is that word that the other side loves to throw around, even though I don't think there's ever a moment where a government is small when they're inside my uterus. And I also just want to say, 26 states, this is not just southern states, 26 states are poised to ban abortion. And, again, and I've said this so many times, the impact of these laws will directly harm low-income Black, Indigenous people, as well as immigrants, and all of those who can't afford to travel across state lines to seek abortion care elsewhere. And these people are going to be denied the chance to control their being, their futures, their destiny, their lives, because these bans take away choices. So beyond protecting the right to legal abortion, we have to make sure that abortion access is available to everyone, regardless of background and situation. And also, I think it's important to say that even in places that have promised to ensure abortion stays legal, even those states have work to do because of cost, right, and location of healthcare providers. It's not easily available to everyone, even in the states that won't ban it. So we have to tackle this problem. And I will just finish with a bit of history and also what I feel like the next step is in this fight. You know, it was 1960 when the first ever birth control pill was introduced. And at that time, it wasn't even legal in some states for doctors to actually prescribe it, right? It took a Supreme Court case, which we all know to be Griswold versus Connecticut in 1965, to finally make it lawful for married women to use contraception. Only married women. Unmarried women would have to wait 7 more years for their own Supreme Court case. And then in 1972, before they were legally allowed to use the pill. But earlier, that earlier case, the Griswold versus Connecticut, was important for those that don't know, not just because after the birth control pill became legal, college enrollment for women who had been prescribed the pill by the age of 18 rose by 20%. The law was important because it established that women were allowed to use birth control based on her constitutional right to privacy. And that same right to privacy, obviously, was the basis for that big one, which it looks like the courts are poised to overturn, and that's Roe v. Wade. And the thing that we have to remember is the idea of privacy is so essential in these cases because women in America have never been protected by an equal rights amendment in the Constitution. We have no protections as women in the Constitution. The USA, our country, is still one of the only industrialized, developed nations in the world with no provision in their constitution that specifically addresses gender equality. And because we have never been considered equal or been protected by an ERA, I feel like our right to bodily autonomy has never been explicitly guaranteed. So my fight now, 38 states have ratified it. There is no reason for the Equal Rights Amendment to not be published in our Constitution, except for the arbitrary deadline. But you know what? We could take that to court too. Let's pressure the archivist to publish the ERA in our Constitution so we have some sort of constitutional basis to fight these fights with, and we're not fighting in a vacuum for another 50 years. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. And you know, Alyssa, it just strikes me, you know, our country is so backwards and so behind when it comes to gender equality. And you saw it when Kamala Harris became vice president, and they said, now little girls everywhere will know that it's like every other Western nation's done it. Like we were last to the party. Maybe they'll no longer be embarrassed that we've been lagging so hard for so long, but they knew before Kamala Harris, you know, for instance, the leader of Germany. Ms. Merkel. So with that, Kristen Dorr, you are our door to what the far right wing is talking about. How are they responding to this? What are you seeing? What does this mean as far as the growth of the far right wing movement? And what do we need to be doing to counter it?
A lot to begin answering there. But I mean, I think the first thing I will say is that there's 2 things that mainly led to this. And that was, you know, a 50-year effort by the religious right and the far right to overturn Roe. And it's, you know, they've put a lot of effort into that. And then I'll say that's the first one. The second one is 2016 and the unholy alliance between, you know, the religious right and Donald Trump. And so, I mean, I think I'll just start off with that second one. But, you know, I think a lot of right-wing, you know, evangelical, conservative, like leaders knew how problematic Donald Trump was as a candidate. And they went ahead and supported him because he promised that he would elect or he would nominate judges to the Supreme Court that, you know, would be favorable to the religious right in overturning Roe. And so what we saw was that Trump got, you know, 3 Supreme Court justices, and the Republican Party also, you know, prevented Barack Obama from filling a number of lower court positions. And so you saw Trump fill those lower court positions as well. And so this has been, you know, this has been a 50-year effort. And so it hasn't just been the courts, it's also been trying to chip away with it, at it with legislation and finding ways to, you know, whatever ways that they can to just, you know, limit it and say, well, we're not in violation of Roe. This is, you know, we just want to make sure that women are safe. And so we've seen that. And then we've also seen this, you know, media campaign and trying to use different language to talk about abortion, and trying to compare it to, you know, the Holocaust or slavery. And so you see this multi-pronged approach, you know, by the far right and the religious right for a number, you know, 50 years. And that's kind of how we ended up where we are at the moment. And I think one of the really difficult things is that, you know, this is only step 1 for, you know, the far right. They would want to see a rollback in rights of, you know, for LGBTQ Americans. They want to roll back you know, the right to marry who you want to sleep with who you want to. They, you know, they want to ban abortion completely. And so what we've seen is that anti-abortion activists are already meeting with their allies in Congress, and they're trying to find a way to institute a complete ban on abortion if, you know, in the fall they have a Republican majority. And we've also seen anti-abortion activists start to meet with, you know, presidential candidates and trying to figure out whether they would be on board to support such legislation. And so I think we have that to be concerned about. And you know, one of the things that we've seen in this draft opinion was also chipping away at that right to privacy. And while in the draft opinion, Alito states that it only applies to abortion and that it doesn't apply to other rights based on privacy, you can see how he begins to open the door for other rights based on privacy to be chipped away. And so some of those rights include, you know, the same-sex marriage. And what we see is on the far right, and we're seeing very much support for that. And there was, you know, an anti-choice activist who was already talking about how to make the Texas abortion ban, which allows people to sue anybody who aids a woman in getting an abortion up to $10,000, and that, you know, effectively ends abortion in the state. And she wants to apply that same strategy to teaching, you know, to teachers and to librarians, school boards, anybody teaching about LGBTQ issues in schools. And so you see, you know, this effort to use what they've learned in the abortion, you know, and trying to outlaw abortion to these other topics. And the last thing I will just say about that is that, you know, on the very far right, and we're talking, you know, white nationalists and whatnot, there is glee and there is excitement and there is an effort, you know, there's a desire to turn back the country to 1950, you know, and, you know, teach abstinence only, and to, and to make it so that, you know, it really take away LGBTQ Americans' rights. So that is definitely something that we need to be worried about. And I think what I will say is that there's a stark choice, and I think we need to make it clear for everybody else that there's a stark choice come November. between, you know, the right and what they're trying to take away, and you know, the Democrats and what's going on there. So that's the first thing, and I'm hoping I'm answering most of your question, but there is
That's
just
good.
so much there, and it is hard to know even where to begin.
Ben, can I make a comment?
Sure, and then we'll go to Alyssa next. See, she has her hand up too.
Okay, let me
Dr.
just say that listening to everybody and thinking about what's been happening the last couple of days, we have to learn how to be harder on the people we vote for. We have to be harder in remembering what they do and holding them accountable. If you look at who's on the Supreme Court right now, how did Clarence Thomas get on the Supreme Court? Well, do we have any memories of that? Democrats voted for Clarence. Joe Biden was the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Some of us were involved in trying to stop him from being put on the court. The fights that we've had for people before that to try, and since then, Alito himself, who apparently wrote this opinion, the American Bar Association Committee, which decides whether people are qualified, or at least they used to, or unqualified, was chaired by one of the most important people in the civil rights community, who had been head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who, despite all the things about Alito that people brought up, went ahead and cleared him to be there. We have to, and when we hear people in the Congress who we voted for doing things that, and saying things and interfering with and not doing what, you know, then we need to say something. We also have to be stronger in supporting and using the institutions that we support. We started the Constitution Society because we wanted to have a counter to the Federalist Society. It never did do what many of us hoped that it would do. And it was never the power with Democrats, when Democrats were in control of the Senate, that could exercise the power that the Federalists used with the Republicans. They never gave them that purchase. So
Dr.
I
Berry,
think that we ought to be hold Republicans, you know, kick Republicans who are bad for things, but we ought to also hold our own people more accountable and check more on what they do.
Dr. Berry, for people who are not aware, can you explain who the Federalist Society is?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because
thought
I
people
think,
knew.
no, don't be sorry, but I think they are just as dangerous as the National Rifle Association.
They are.
And we should all be working to take down the Federalist Society as hard as we take down the NRA.
Right. The Federalist Society was set up with all this funding from all of these, you know, very wealthy people, Republicans, to in fact groom. They talk about people grooming people. Republicans always talk about somebody groomed somebody to do something. They groomed young people when they are in law school by putting money into lectures and fellowships and all kinds of things, and giving them pipelines to opportunities to come out and be the judge candidates at the lower level, first at the district court. And they worked hand in glove with the Republicans in the Senate on judiciary and the leadership to make sure that the Federalist Society was seen as the pipeline if you wanted to make it. And you should join with the Republicans. And that was a good way to get to be on the court and eventually to be on the Supreme Court if you were a young lawyer looking to get ahead, or a young law student get ahead. And they are powerful. And even Donald Trump, before him, Reagan and other Republicans, would always look to see who the Federalist Society wanted to have put on the court. And Trump even said he was picking his nominees from what the Federalist Society had. We, as I said, some years ago, all of us on our side started the Constitution Society. We thought that they were going to be, they were going to counter, and the Democrats would use them in the same way, and they would be seen as a pipeline, and we could like get some people from law school and get them through and all that. But it never fulfilled its promise because we didn't put enough energy into it or resources or hold the politicians accountable for looking to them. I'm just saying that if we want to win fights, and this fight, which they've been carrying on for 50 years, that in fact, we need to push our people and be more cohesive in terms of where we spend our money, who we donate to, what we do, what they're doing, these politicians, and support them. And yes, we want them in office, and we should use elections and vote and all that. But if they don't follow through, then we end up with, there's no reason in the world Clarence Thomas should be sitting up on the Supreme Court of the United States. And there he is.
Amen. Amen. Well, I co-signed that as a guy who was an 18-year-old member of Black Men for Anita Hill.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. Some of us had some sense back in the day. There were a lot of us who didn't. Ms. Milano.
Yes, I'm sorry, but this is my first opportunity I've had to talk about this with people that, are over the age of 12. Just teaching my kids a lot. But I want to speak to really quickly, and I think we should have a conversation about specific messaging, because the one thing that I have come across in, since this was quote unquote leaked, is that everybody that I speak to says, oh, this is a slippery slope. They're going to try to take away gay marriage. They're going to try to take LGBTQ. And I'm just like, can we have a moment here? Because I know that collectively, when we win as women, we take care of the gender diverse, we take care of the LGBTQ community, we take care of all of these things. And when we have the attention and the support from 85% of American people, regardless of political party, on a single issue, let's not cloud the messaging. Let's keep the messaging onto safe abortion. I've heard a lot from our side in the last few days. Well, this is why we need to abolish the filibuster. This is why we need to expand the courts, or this is why we need to make DC a state. All of that is true. But every time we go someplace else, we lose the support of people from the other side who are just focusing on this one issue, which is vital to the future of democracy. So I'd like to just suggest that when we're talking to our friends about it, when we're talking to, different groups of people, that we try to stay clear of these other issues that are so vital to our democracy. I totally get it, but let's try to stay on point here. They are trying to take away a woman's right to her own destiny, which, by the way, would extract $3 trillion from our economy over 10 years. And let's keep it simple. Let's keep it simple in our messaging. We can't get wonky with it. We have to keep it simple. That's how I feel. If anyone else would like to chime in with another perspective, I'd love to hear that.
No, I think it's absolutely right. And it's a perfect segue to Marge Baker. Marge, can you just talk about, from your perspective, where we go from here? And also please let people know about May 14th.
Sure. I'm thinking, first of all, it's fantastic to be on this panel and watching the chat. It is just really so exciting to be in a community that understands and cares about this issue. I think there's a three-part plan here. One, and I think we've been hearing our speakers talk about it, we have to continue mobilizing. We have to be angry. We have to help people understand in elected office that we are a force to be reckoned with. Let's be clear. What just happened or will happen if this opinion becomes law is that a majority that includes 4 justices nominated by men who became president after winning only a minority of the popular vote will have stripped the constitutional right to an abortion from Americans around the country. And that's despite the fact that most Americans, Americans support the right to abortion by overwhelming majorities, 2-1. So we have to continue mobilizing. We have to make our anger felt. On May 14th, there is a day of action being planned on May 14th, and we can put information in the chat about how to engage. The outpouring that we saw at courts around the country when news of this broke was powerful. It sent a message, and that message is being heard. So we have to continue mobilizing. That's first. And feel the anger, show the anger. This is horrific, and we need to be out there saying precisely that and talking about who will be hurt by this, who will be harmed by this. Second is accountability. Mary Frances was talking about accountability. It's absolutely true. We have to stand up and hold people accountable for the role that they've played in getting us to this point. Most directly, folks should know that the House passed Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify the liberties in Roe v. Wade, has passed the House, and there will be a vote next Wednesday, May 11th, in the Senate. We're not going to win that because of issues around the filibuster, but I think Alyssa's right. This is not about the filibuster. This is about holding people accountable for how they vote on that, Democrats and Republicans. Senator Schumer knows he's not going to win this, but he's putting it on the floor because he wants everybody's name called. He wants to show where people are. So May 11th will be that vote. May 14th is the day of action. The last point, and we've talked about it, is we have to win elections at all levels of government. What's really interesting is that the other side is far more interested in talking about accountability for the leak than accountability for how the forces of the far right have driven their elected officials to an unprecedented, unsustainable, and wildly unpopular determination by 5 justices on the Supreme Court to remove constitutional protections for fundamental liberties. And that's what we have to frame this election about. Which side are you on? Are you on the side of protecting constitutional liberties, or on the side of the far right manipulating the rules, manipulating the process, manipulating the election process so that they can gain power in order to impose their will on everyone else? So mobilize, make our anger felt, understand that we're a force to be reckoned with, hold our elected officials accountable, and make sure we work as hard as we possibly can in the upcoming elections, future elections, to elect pro-abortion, pro-privacy rights officials to represent us. So 3-part plan. Let's get to it.
Amen. 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 Let's go to questions. I know that we've got several from the audience, and we've only got about 9 minutes left. The Marge to Bacon is asking, Marge, for you to just go over a little more about the political state of play and options. Maybe talk a bit more about what you think we need to be doing at the state level. Like, what are the implications beyond, taking back the Senate, holding on to the House, making sure there's white people on the Supreme Court? Like, what else do we need to be doing? Like, let's get rid of it.
I think we have to focus on state legislators. We have to focus on governors. We have to focus on state attorneys general. All of those folks will be playing a critical role in the upcoming battles we're going to have state by state. So those are 3 very, very critical offices. Michigan, for example, has somebody running for governor who clearly is anti-choice, and somebody running for AG who is a Trumpite. So is a MAGA person. We need to make sure we are identifying the places at the state level, but it's state legislators, governors, attorney generals are going to play a huge role in how things play out in the state, and whether we have folks in office who can help minimize the harm and hopefully enact reparative legislation.
Amen. Amen. And it speaks, I think so. much to the prescient and important work that we do here with our young elected officials program and really getting young people to run for higher and higher office, and also the importance of our African American Ministers Leadership Conference. Reverend Davis, do you want to talk for a second about what the progressive clergy response to this moment looks like, what that conversation is? You're on mute.
Reverend Davis, you're still muted.
Oh, no, you're stuck on mute. All right, we'll come back to you. Marge, Sarah asks, even if we codify abortion rights, can the Supreme Court strike it down as unconstitutional?
Yes, I can answer that. It's possible. And I would also defer to Dr. Berry because she's the legal expert here. It's certainly possible. The question is, what authority does Congress have to enact such legislation? But it's still important to do. It may be challenged. It'll be a fight, but we will have a law on the books and hopefully protect as many people as we can in the interim. The other thing I would be remiss if I didn't say, and I know folks understand this, this is not the law yet. So it's really, really important as we're fighting these battles to make sure that individuals who are wanting an abortion can still get an abortion. It's still legal. This opinion is not in effect yet. So as we're fighting all these battles, there are folks who may be potentially foregoing the possibility of getting an abortion or abortion care because they believe this is now the law of the land, and it's not. So I think that's just one other point I'd want to emphasize. And I don't know if Dr. Berry has any other thoughts on the Women's Health Protection Act, but I would be interested to hear.
I do. Am I unmuted?
You are.
Yes. If a statute is passed, that is, if we could get the law passed, the bar for striking it down is higher than us just trying to figure out some way to do something immediately about Roe v. Wade being overturned. That doesn't mean any statute can be declared unconstitutional. So that I'm sure people would challenge it. There would be a drawn out fight. And who knows what will happen by the time it ever gets anywhere to be decided by the court. So that I think that if we could get a statute passed, then we should try very hard to get that done. I wanted to say while I'm and that's important to do. That's why it's important to do it. While I have the floor, I think somebody mentioned messaging in the chat and how do we do it and what's the importance of it, and gave some examples of things that people don't know what they are. I wanted to say, I believe in reproductive justice, but I have discovered that ordinary lay people, as I go around the country speaking to people and doing things, don't know what reproductive justice is. They don't know what those words are. In fact, when I said to some people, climate justice, they didn't know what I was talking about. When I said climate change and all that, but when I said, we got to have climate justice, they said, what? So it depends on your audience and who you're trying to talk to. I know what reproductive justice is. We know what it is, but it might be better to talk about making sure that people who don't have resources have the resources that make it real, that they can have a choice about what they can do, whether it's housing or the minimum wage or whether it's childcare or whatever it is. And then say that constitutes, if you want to say it, that means people call that reproductive justice. But if you just say that, it's like me saying Federalist Society and people didn't know what I was talking about. You got to be, in the messaging clear to the audience.
But I do want to, I want to say that people's lives are in danger. I don't know if anyone saw the Vice article that said that, and I'm gonna paste it and put it into the chat for all of you. But the headline is data broker is selling location data of people who visit abortion clinics.
Yes, I saw
it
that.
costs just over $160 to get a week's worth of data on where people who visited Planned Parenthood came from and where they went afterwards. So this is an all hands on deck moment. This is the moment of my lifetime for sure. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in like, oh, this is just another thing, another day, another piece of history. We can't think like that. We cannot. I know it's exhausting. It's hard. It's this work is really hard, but we have to stay motivated because this fight takes care of everything else.
And it may be, Elisa, it may be that you said freedom earlier. Freedom,
Yes.
you know, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we're trying to make sure that women can have. And freedom is what we want for women, the freedom to decide what to do with their lives and to be able to make a decision about what to do with their
And can I
lives
tell
with
you-
non-interference.
Can I tell you why, Doctor? I think that word is perfect.
Yes.
Is because that's what the other side is
Right.
constantly beating their chest about.
Right.
Robert Reich, take him or leave him. He had a great, not my favorite person, but he had a great tweet the other day that I want to just read to everyone. If you outlaw abortions, criminalize gender affirming care, ban mask mandates, dictate what educators can teach in schools, and stop people from voting, you are not the party of limited government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we could somehow just turn that on them, because that's it. They speak and preach of freedom. If we can turn that word against them, like they've turned the "my body, my choice" phrase against us, which is there's literally no comparison. With the mask, with the vaccination mandates. If we could use that word in the messaging for this, I think we will win.
Amen. And let's close with that. You know, we will end on time even if we started a little late. But Lissa, Mary Frances, that last conversation about freedom answers the question of our last questioner, which was, what's the best rationale point approach to use with those of us who live in solidly red counties and states? The great former leader of the National Abortion Rights Action League, NARAL, is Elise Hogue, wrote a book that I teach to my students at the University of Pennsylvania. And she spent a long time going into like the psychographics and kind of the deep, self-interest of voters in the middle who can be pulled to the left or to the right, specifically looking at how we win this battle. And what Elise found was that what pulls people in the middle towards the right is appeals to patriarchy. I mean, this is full on about patriarchy. And what pulls people in the middle towards us is appeals to freedom. And our social movements have always at their core, whether it was the suffragettes or the civil rights movement or the American Revolution itself, been about freedom. And so if you're wondering what to talk about with people that need to be pulled towards us, if you live in Trump country like I do in Maryland, which is a purple state with a lot of red counties and I live in one, talk about freedom. This is fundamentally a fight for freedom. I want to thank each of the freedom fighters who have led us in this conversation tonight. Reverend Dr. Delicia Davis, esteemed Marge Baker, the incomparable Alyssa Milano, the sharp and fearsome and funny Dr. Mary Frances Berry. I also want to thank Kristen Dorr, our great researcher at Right Wing Watch. I want to thank Meg Simmons and Raina Aronowitz, who have been behind the scenes, and the entire team. And I want to remind you that in supporting people for the American way, you are making yourself part of one of the most diverse, incredible group of allies in this country. Part of what Reverend Dr. Delicia Davis does is organize thousands of Black ministers to stand up for equality for everyone and freedom for everyone. Part of what our Young Elected Officials program does is organize that bench. We have 1,400 young elected officials, the most diverse group anywhere. of young people who are the bench for the future of leadership in this country. And let us not ever be deterred in this fight. We will win this fight. As I used to tell folks when we were fighting the Tea Party at the NAACP, it's not a matter of if, but when. This court was packed by two presidents who failed to win the national popular vote. It was not just a minority of people, it was a minority of voters in those elections that put them in power, and they packed the court anyways. Let us be focused, as Dr. Mary Frances Berry and Ms. Milano and Marge are so clear on seizing the power that is rightfully ours, because we represent the majority of the country. So thank you all for being part of People for the American Way. Go fight, win, do not lose hope, do not lose faith. It is not a matter of if, but when. We've been through setbacks before. We always triumph in the end because we will fight to the end. God bless each of you. Go fight, win.